This event occurred when I was 10 years old on Halloween night. At the time, I was still a stick-thin girl with nothing to actually distinguish that I was a girl. Especially since earlier that year, I decided I didn't want to be confused with my twin sister anymore. So I'd gotten a pixie cut and I had began dressing in black. At the time, I had no girlfriends, but up the road half a mile was my friend Austin and another mile and a half up, Quinn. I had really become close with them and would often go exploring and fishing with them, so it was only natural that we decided that the three of us would go trick-or-treating together. Compared to Austin in my neighborhood, Quinn's was the more wealthier one, so in hopes of getting the best candy, we decided we'd go to Quinn's. I had been to Quinn's house a few times, but most of the time we hung out, we'd walk another mile up from Quinn's to the Rudders, which was our local gas station for Slurpees, and then another 2 miles down from my house to the park and lake. So Austin and I weren't too familiar with this neighborhood and the ones around it. But I digress. My mother had a new boyfriend at the time, so she didn't really care what I was doing. She would have gotten mad if she'd known I was hanging out with boys again. It was Pennsylvania, so it was super cold. So any costume I had on was pretty much covered with my jacket and leggings. I had been a dark fairy, so you could still guess what I was just because of the black sparkly wings. Anyways, I had left early to go walk to Austin's house. When I got there, I had to ask Austin what he was because he was in a white button-up, black dress pants, as well as a tie and a heavy black jacket over it. He moved his jacket to show me the cheap sheriff's badge attached to his belt and told me he was a detective. I had laughed and his parents shooed us away. I remember his dad grumbling about what was a boy doing with sparkly wings, when I then realized he'd been talking about me, which definitely dampened my spirits. Austin's dad was drinking though, so I didn't correct him. Austin attempted to cheer me up the entire way to Quinn's house, and soon all was forgotten. Quinn's house was the biggest house I had ever been at the time. It was in a really nice neighborhood with houses on each side that looked just like his. Quinn's mother welcomed us warmly, and she had gave us treats to start off our trick-or-treating. Quinn definitely had the best costume of all of us. A realistic-looking Grim Reaper robe with a black screen over the face, with red glowing eyes, and a plastic bloody sheath. Quinn's neighborhood was swamped with kids from my school, and soon we had gone through almost the entire neighborhood, with our bags really weighing us down. It was getting late, but Quinn wanted us to continue on, and Austin and I were in no rush to go home, so we agreed despite how dark it was getting. Quinn had told us that there was a shortcut to the other neighborhood through his backyard if we went down the hill and then through the trees for a while. Now, that kind of freaked me out, but being the only girl, I wasn't about to let on that I was scared. So I gulped when this was suggested, but nodded my approval, and off we went. Quinn had taken off his mask to better see as we stumbled down Quinn's backyard and decides to leave his sheath behind. We start through the woods, and within about 5 minutes of walking and joking, we all then realized that none of us had thought to bring a flashlight. But it was fall, so there were no leaves on the trees, and light from the moon really helped to light up the way, if only enough not to walk into a tree. Austin asks how much longer, and I can tell by the hitch in his voice that he likes this shortcut just about as much as I do. Before Quinn can answer, we hear a crunch from somewhere up ahead of us, and we all freeze as Quinn sticks up a hand in the air to silence us. "Did you guys hear that?" Quinn says. I remain silent, but Austin snorts and replies, "Stop it, Quinn. That's not going to work. You're not going to scare us." Quinn gasps and then says, "I'm not joking. I really thought I heard something." And before I can tell them both just to keep walking, a shape in the darkness catches my eyes. It's up ahead of us, maybe 20 feet. It's dark, so I can't really distinguish anything, but it's only a moment later that no guessing is needed.
"Well, hey there, boys,"
came a strange man's reply from the spot. Quinn and Austin turn in horror as the man continues to walk towards us. "What? Who are you?" stammers Quinn. With this, a deep laugh bellows out of the man.
Oh, me? I'm the devil.
This whole time he's walking closer to us, but in the silhouette of darkness, I see no signs of this man wearing a costume. No horns or anything. This is my property. What are you doing in the woods? Quinn demands, sounding less brave with each syllable.
Oh, me? I'm just out for a stroll. I don't really get out nearly as often as I'd like.
He responds smoothly. Now he's about 10 feet from us, halfway peeking out from behind a tree. Quinn, let's just get out of here, I say. But Quinn, in a moment of bravery or stupidity, which is debatable, yells out to the man. What the hell's wrong with you? Stop talking to us. We're just trying to get through. And with that, Quinn nudges Austin and I and begins making a wide turn around the man, who silently watches us and spins around the tree with just his head and hands sticking out to watch us as we walk past. Austin then says to me, "It's Halloween. He's just trying to scare us." I don't respond, just keep my eyes locked on the man. He then yells,
I hope I haven't scared you boys. I just really like your costumes. Why don't you come closer and let me have a better look?
Immediately that comment sent up red flags to me, because you couldn't tell what Austin was, especially at a distance, and with Quinn's hood and sheath gone, you couldn't tell what he was either. That left me, and I didn't like that.
Hey you, boy with the wings. Come over here. Let me help you fly.
And with that, he just started laughing again. Now, I had been getting bullied for how short my hair was, and Quinn and Austin knew how much it hurt me every time I was mistaken for a boy, so they had taken up to sticking up for me, and unfortunately, tonight was no exception. Hey, stop talking to her, you creep! Austin yelled, and with that, he picked up a rock and threw it at the man. It bounced off the tree where the man was half covered, and the man suddenly did a creepy little half jump, half dance, and clapped his hands.
Her? You're a girl? That's even better.
And with that, he, much like a wild animal, bounded forward, hands first on all fours. I immediately dropped my candy, and all three of us began screaming our heads off and running. I don't think he chased us long, but with the crunching under our feet and our screams, it was pretty much impossible to tell. I quickly had to abandon my wings too, as they continued to get stuck to branches as we weaved through the trees in pure terror. We didn't stop until we made it through the trees and onto a well-lit street, though there were very few kids out at this point anyway. We were now over 15 minutes away from Quinn's house and probably an hour plus walk back to my house, and it was only getting later. Quinn had dropped his bag too. Only Austin kept his, clutching it like it were a child. We took the long-lit way back to Quinn's house in almost complete silence, terrified the man would appear again, but he didn't. When we actually made it, we frantically explained what happened, and though sympathetic, Quinn's mom said we couldn't call the police. She said that nothing had happened, and we had no description of the man, and that it was Halloween. The man was probably long gone, and also was almost definitely just trying to scare us. She drove Austin and I home, and I ended up getting grounded for being out so late and also leaving my costume behind. I didn't even bother to explain what had happened, and she didn't seem to notice that I had no candy. The next day, though, I couldn't go out because I was grounded. Quinn came over with his mom and gave me a bag of candy that they had bought, because he knew I had lost mine in the woods. We never talked about it again after that, all convincing ourselves that it was probably just some creepy Halloween prank that went too far. So did the devil, or whoever you are. I really, really hope to never see you again, and especially on Halloween. This is a short story, and one that may not be very scary to most of you, but to me, it's one of the most unnerving and strange things that's ever happened to me. To set the stage of the story, I'll explain a little bit about my life at the time. I'm the youngest in a family of 5. When this happened, I was about 9 years old. My family was living in a house that was a little too small for comfort. Thankfully, about a year earlier, my mother had gotten a promotion at her job and had finally saved up enough to be ready to buy a larger house for us to move into. We teamed up with an old family friend who was a realtor, and nearly every weekend we went to do viewings of new houses as a family. This went on for months. My mother had a really strange obsession with looking at different houses, so I think she dragged out the process partially for her own enjoyment and partially to ensure that we really found that perfect house. We didn't really mind though. It was really fun to imagine what life would be like in every different house that we went to. What room would be mine? Where would we put our furniture? It was just a really fun way for me to spend my weekends as a kid, and I still look back fondly to that time. Before I continue, I want to make it completely clear that we never saw the same house twice. Every weekend it was a new house, so what is coming up just really can't be explained by me ever seeing this house before. During this time in my life, I also really suffered frequently from nightmares. They were the kind that would shock me awake and leave me cowering under my blankets until I fell back to sleep or the sun finally came up. Because of this, at the time, this dream didn't really seem out of the ordinary to me. I only remember a short amount of the dream that I had that night. The beginning of it is nothing more than a blur to me. All I know is that the premise of the dream was that I was in a dollhouse and I was exploring every single room trying to find a way out. I felt a strong urgency as I went from room to room. It was like eyes were on me the entire time and something was hungry and following me. While most of the dream is really nothing more than a blur in my memory, the next part, however, I remember in vivid detail. It was almost as if I was really there. I opened a door and saw a blue staircase. The stairs were nothing more than wooden slats that lead down to an unfinished stone basement. The odd thing about this basement was that everything was that same ocean blue color. The stairs, the floor, ceiling, and walls were all painted in a thick sloppy coat of this blue color. Even the lighting was coming in as this blue hue where it streamed in from thin windows at the upper part of the stone walls. I walked hesitantly down the steps. I remember not wanting to go down there, but my body just moved on its own, like how it does sometimes in dreams. After every step I went down, more and more of the basement came into view, and I began to hear a strange demonic sounding chanting begin to get louder. It was a 2-room basement. The first room, the one directly in front of me, was completely empty other than the normal basement hardware, such as a water heater. Shadow had flickered in the corner of my vision like light had been cast from a fire. I didn't look at the second room until I reached the bottom of the stairs. Once I was on the last step, I turned my head to the left and looked into the other room. I was immediately gripped with fear. What I then saw was a circle of humanoid shadows dancing hand in hand. If you've ever seen the Howl's Moving Castle movie, they sort of looked like the shadows that surrounded the Witch of the Waste in the castle scene. I was transfixed watching their dancing and frozen in fear. Suddenly, like a bad jump scare in a video game, a shadow then jumped at me into view. I then woke up terrified before it was able to grab me. I remember not being able to go back to sleep after having this dream, but like I said, I had a lot of nightmares when I was a kid. This dream, like all the others, fell away from my memory pretty quickly. Soon enough, I didn't even remember it had happened, and I moved on with my life for some time without giving it a second thought. Now the next part of the story sounds really far-fetched, but I swear it's true. Like many other Saturdays, we went to view a couple of houses. If I remember correctly, this house was the second one we saw that day, and it was going to be the last. I walked down the block hand in hand with my mother, snow crunching under my boots. We were at the back of the group, heading towards the house on the corner. It was a strange little house, painted beige and looking unfinished. The exterior of the house was strangely shaped, more of a parallelogram rather than a perfect square or rectangle. The yard was very small and it looked really cramped, with its large back porch taking up almost the entire backyard. This may seem dramatic, but I felt really uneasy before we even entered the house. Something felt off about the house, and the younger me knew it. Once we entered the house, my feelings were affirmed by my father. He was always a believer in the supernatural, and when he stepped in, he mentioned how the air felt heavy and he felt like something was off there, and I could feel it too. It felt like eyes were on me and I was on edge. My mother, however, always the skeptic, just hushed him and moved on with the tour so we wouldn't waste our realtor's time for nothing. So we continued going room to room and exploring this strange house. The house on its own probably would be a perfect setting to a horror story. I remember my sister describing it as being like a dollhouse. I couldn't agree more. The entire first floor, including the kitchen, dining room, and living room, was an open space that could easily be viewed from what I could describe as a balcony-type hallway on the second floor. It was like the whole ceiling had just been taken out. Even the kitchen cabinets ended short, like they stopped at an invisible ceiling. This wasn't the only strange thing about the house, but everything else on the first floor was in small details that built into a really scary picture. Some of it was nothing big, like every light being a pull chain, and none of the switches on the walls seeming to work. Other details, like how the whole first floor just seemed dirty. Floorboards were broken, there was trash in the corners, broken molding on the walls, broken counters and cabinets in the kitchen, and things like that. I think the worst part was the doors. Every door had the lock set up so that you'd lock it from the outside, as if to keep something or someone locked in the room. Some of these doors, especially the bedrooms, the inside of the doors were really scratched up, as if something was trying to get out when it was locked. We had grown uneasy at this point. My parents and elder siblings especially, who at the time better understood the connotations of the weird things we found. Even so, we then moved on to finish the tour. There was really only one main room on the upstairs of the house. It was the master bedroom, and somehow the strangest part of the house up to that point. While the rest of the house was dirty and damaged, the master bedroom seemed to be completely remodeled and new. It was honestly the nicest bedroom that I'd ever seen. It was huge and fancy looking, and it even had a jacuzzi in it. The weird part about this, though, was that the room was all decorated in the same blood red maroon color. The walls, the carpet, the bedding, everything in the room was this color. Something about it was really unsettling, and when my sister made a snarky joke about how the color was to hide the bloodstains when whatever murderer killed their victim here, my mother ushered us out of the room quickly. By this point, my whole family was thoroughly creeped out and ready to leave this house. But because we had already seen so much, we decided we might as well finish with the last room, the basement. Though things were already really strange and unsettling, the basement was the final straw for me. We opened the basement to reveal a set of blue stairs leading down to a blue room. Though I had forgotten the nightmare up until now, it all came rushing back to me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing at first. Every step I went down only proved what I was seeing was real. Exactly like my dream, I walked down the blue steps into an unfinished blue basement. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, and stairs were all slathered thickly in the same color of ocean blue paint. The only difference was the room was dimly lit only by the white midday winter light streaming in from the windows. I was so afraid to see the other room as I approached the bottom of the stairs. Finally, I had turned my head left to look into the second room and saw nothing. It was completely empty other than what looked like a filled hole in the middle of the room where the shadow had been dancing around in my dream. Perhaps it was from a furnace or something else, but I didn't care to know. Tears threatening to escape from my eyes, I grabbed my mom's hand and then said, "Mom, I really want to leave. I'm scared." My family agreed that it was time to end this strange tour. My mother took me outside while my father and siblings finished up with the realtor, saying their goodbyes. My mom asked me what was wrong, but I never told her. I didn't expect her to believe me that I had dreamed about a house that I'd never seen or been in months before being here. We left that day and clearly never moved ahead to purchase. Quickly, my family forgot all about that strange house, but to this day, it still really haunts me. I can't explain how I had that dream or what it meant, but all I know is that something happened in that house, and I really don't want to know what it was.